So I'd like to introduce Jennifer Hubbard, who is President and Chief Executive Officer at Polar Knowledge Canada, to make a few opening remarks, please.
Thanks, Laura. Are you able to hear me? All right. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's knowledge sharing webinar on caribou abundance and migration. My name is Jennifer Hubbard, and I am the president at Polar Knowledge Canada. We're headquartered here in Cambridge Bay, Nunavut, where we operate the Canadian High Arctic Research Station. I would have loved this morning to have met you from the research station, but the weather in Cambridge Bay this morning is quite blustery. So I'm actually joining you from home because we've closed down the building today. So I'll tell you a little bit about Polar Knowledge Canada. It was established in June of 2015 and is the federal agency responsible for advancing Canada's knowledge of the Arctic and strengthening Canadian leadership in polar science and technology. We're a science-based organization, and we're mandated to advance knowledge of the Canadian North through science, technology, local, traditional, and Indigenous knowledge. As a small organization with a pan-Northern mandate, we deliver results through collaborative projects and knowledge mobilization, creating and sharing knowledge to support evidence-based decision-making in the North. The discussion today is the culmination of collaboration and co-development since the Regional Planning Knowledge Sharing Workshop took place here at the Canadian High Arctic Research Station in March of 2020. That workshop focused on perspectives of Indigenous knowledge holders, knowledge producers, and knowledge users who came together to identify and discuss key themes of relevance for Northern communities. Topics that directly impact food security, safe access to traditional hunting areas, and wellness of the community were raised as key concerns. Caribou and Arctic char were considered especially important because they provide vital country foods to communities across the Arctic. Out of these discussions came the 5 themes for which collaborative assessments were undertaken and which reports will be published in the coming weeks. The issues being discussed today are complex, and addressing them can be challenging. The Canadian North spans thousands of kilometers, and different regions experience and understand issues in different ways. Years of lived experiences on the land provide a wealth of knowledge, uniting ways of knowing, scientific, technological, local, traditional, and Indigenous, provides new insights to support innovative solutions to the challenges faced by Northerners. The inclusion of that local, traditional, and Indigenous knowledge and prioritizing community voices in these webinars and other knowledge mobilization strategies is essential. I'd like to thank you for joining today, and I hope you enjoy the session.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, for providing us with some vital background to today's webinar and about the efforts that have gone into creating the reports that are part of this series. So as Jennifer spoke to, the reports are the result of a collaborative effort that was actually done over the last 6 to 8 months, and most of it, all of it was actually done online during the pandemic. And the reports were formed around questions that were generated, as Jennifer said, in a workshop that was held in 2020, March 2020. And so it's those questions were the result of a lot of thought and consideration. So it's really, as the Caribou Report now nears publication, it's fitting that we revisit these original questions today with the Indigenous knowledge holders and one of the report authors who contributed to the knowledge contained in the Caribou Report, and who are interested in having discussions today to bridge gaps in knowledge and understanding and talk about emerging opportunities. Of course, we know that questions create more questions. And as you, the attendees here in the audience, and the panelists here in the room today, as you listen to the discussion, we invite you to add your questions. And those of you attending can type your questions in the Q&A space by clicking on the Q&A button on your Zoom toolbar. And the slide that's up on the screen right now shows you what that Q&A button looks like and where you can find it. It's down on your Zoom toolbar. While we'd prefer that you use the Q&A function to ask your questions, it's okay if you end up typing them into chat. That's in the Zoom chat that you're all familiar with, and you can actually communicate with the hosts and the panelists using that here today. So we're watching the chat for any questions, and we'll try to make sure that they are answered, if not today, then at a later date. Before we start, I'd like to invite our panel members and those of you in the audience to do two things. First, I invite you to be comfortable with silence, and we already had some of that today with some of the technical issues that we were trying to iron out. So thank you for that. This is a discussion today, not a presentation. Today there will not be any more slides. Instead, we're making space for people to think through their responses and to contribute. Second, I invite you to be curious. Don't be shy. Please put your questions in chat. So let's get to know our panelists today. I invite all of our panelists to turn their cameras on and tell us your name and where you're joining us from. On my screen, I have Johnny Lenny up first. Johnny, would you be able to unmute and just tell us where you're joining from?
Yeah, like I said, I'm Johnny Lenny. I'm from Inuvik, Northwest Territories. I'm a Inuvaluk beneficiary and also a harvester of the porcupine herd and blue nose west herd, I guess they call it. And thank you.
Thank you. I invite Lauren to just unmute yourself and just let us know where you're joining from.
Hi, I'm Lauren Klingayak from Nauyat, and I'm just a hunter and a fisherman. Thank you.
Thank you. Ningola, who do you have with you in? And could we just make
this is
Okay. Just wait, and we're going to put on the video, the camera. My name is Akiro Khilirti from Kimmirut. I can't say I'm a hunter, but I like to follow occasionally when there's fishing trips. I could say I harvest. Also, I also like to participate when someone's going on the land, when someone calls and asks if I could follow. Hi, I'm Akuluk Judea from Kimmirut. I've been participating in engaging sessions about this topic. I could tell you I'm not a hunter, but I share my experiences. So I'll do that again today if necessary, if the time permits.
Can you guys get that?
Okay, thank you very much.
My name is Ningula Khilirti. I'm from Kimmirut. And I'm always, whenever I get the chance to go out, I'm out on the land. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for participating today and for coordinating people at your end. Thank you. Eric. Eric is one of our authors for the Caribou paper and was the working group champion. Eric, can you please just introduce yourself?
Yep, thanks, Laura. Hi, I'm Eric Bongelli. I'm joining from Thunder Bay, Ontario. I'm associated with Lakehead University and KBM Resources Group, an aerial imagery and geomatics and forestry consultants based in Thunder Bay. And as Laura mentioned, I'm representing a group of about 13 authors that all worked together and contributed to the overall report.
Hey, thank you very much, Eric. I just wanted to respond to a question placed in the Q&A box. I believe it's from one of our attendees who are out there in the webinar. I just wanted to point out that we are using Zoom webinars today. It's a lot different from Zoom meetings in that the attendees, you don't have control over your camera or your mic. You're just kind of listening in today. But thank you very much for your question, because I'm sure other people had the same question. Okay, I'm now going to move into our question and answer format. So as moderator today, I'm going to pose a question and then invite a response. And in the hopes that a back and forth discussion can take place. I know that there will be a bit of gaps in the conversation as people mute and unmute themselves, and that's okay. So the first question is, well, I'll start off with a statement. The report from the working group, the Caribou report, focused on 4 herds: Porcupine, George, Bathurst, and Kamanirek. What have you observed about the caribou populations for these herds, and also your local herds? Laura, do you want to speak to anything that you've observed about the caribou herds?
Well, the caribou herd in Nauyat, near Nauyat anyway, well, we have some caribou all year round near Nauyat anyway, but not as much as last year. Last year, there was some on the east side of Repulse Bay. This year, there's almost none there. East side, northeast side. But we do a lot of caribou hunting towards the east side, towards Chester. There's some all year, all winter. That's all I can say for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? What have you just observed in?
For me, I'd like to respond. It hits me from Kimmerut. What we've heard lately is that the common knowledge seems to be that the herd is recovering, and more people are observing, making observations that there are more caribou as compared to earlier times. For example, when we went out fishing, after the cold spell, some people were observing or mentioning and commenting that perhaps they are dying off due to cold. However, or starvation. I forgot the year, 19 something. But I could say I think the caribou is in recovery mode. I think they're on the numbers are on the return. So I could say I just want to end there because that's my own observation and what I've heard. Thank you. Also from me. Sorry, my name is Ningiula. in our community. I take part in hunts whenever the quota system is open. So I tag along. What I've observed too is that there seems to be an increase in the herds. Before, we did notice they were fewer in numbers, but for me, we're seeing greater numbers. And so, and they're more stable, it seems, and we notice them more in different locations. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, I read in the report that I thought it was quite interesting that the decline and increase in herd population sometimes mirrors the a generation or a length of life in the elders' experience, and it somehow it kind of coordinates a little bit with some of your research as well. What can you speak to that and just to the decline in populations in general?
Yeah, for sure. I think, like you mentioned, Laura, our report actually just focused on 4 herds: the Porcupine, the George River, the Bathurst, and the Kaminuriak. And part of that was by design, because they are a good spread geographically across the north, but they also are in distinct phases of their populations. The Porcupine herd is at record highs right now, around 220,000, I think. The George River and Bathurst, the last surveys, they have them both at low numbers. The George River, I think, actually showed a slight increase from 2018 to 2020. And the Kaminuriak is, from the surveys anyway, seems to be about in a midpoint between its historical highs of 500,000 and historical lows of 44,000. And these populations, they all do seem to cycle, and these cycles, as you alluded to, can be fairly long, anywhere from 30 years, we estimate, for the Porcupine herd, to somewhere around 60 years potentially for the Kaminuriak herd and George River herd. And like you mentioned, that can be, from a researcher's perspective, somebody's entire career. From a community member, it can be, close to their entire adult life. And so kind of looking at these populations and their trends in abundance short term has its benefits, but also looking at them long term from a cyclic perspective, I think, has its benefits as well.
Okay, thank you. So Johnny, I'm hoping maybe you can kind of just lend your thoughts here about what some of the root causes might be of decline. What are some of the root causes and the stressors that are impacting the caribou?
Definitely in our region, everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, definitely in our region, like there has been a lot of predation with like wolves and bears, but the root causes, a lot of it has to do with the weather and just where they're, I'm not sure exactly, but lots of hunting too. There in the past, like there's been a lot of hunting, and especially the blue nose herd been hit hard for a few years because they came close to a couple of communities, and we have to go further to hunt them. But a lot of combination of things like you have on your chart there, like there's a lot of factors. But as far as resident hunting, I definitely think the herds will maintain their populations as long as all the hunting is limited to probably indigenous hunting, because there's more and more people. The populations are growing and more people involved in the past. So, as far as consumption, we are taking less and less. Like for example, when I grew up, we had, our family, we used to hunt caribou like every season, like most places in the Arctic where there's caribou close by. Like we have the benefit of 2 herds close, within 100 miles of our community. And so we'd get a few caribou in the spring, a few caribou, and that'll carry us over till the fall. Then we'll get a few caribou in the fall, and then we'll get a few caribou in the winter. And that, like, we always had a supply of fresh meat, and it's still pretty consistent with the 2 herds we got hunted, especially like we got the porcupine herd, like Eric mentioned, is on the high. But it's interesting how like the porcupine herd is a big herd, and I seen it, a lot of them gather on the coast, and while we're hunting, and it's just an unreal sight to see so many caribou, and they also cross the highway south of us, like, so once they cross the highway, like it doesn't matter, trucks and people hunting, they just keep on moving. They're such a big, massive herd when they hit an area, and they just keep on going. But they come and go from the highway, like they got so much areas to cover. It's such a big herd in a big area. It goes all the way to Alaska, winter in Alaska, winter in the Yukon, and winter in part of the NWT here. But no, it's as far as like for it's, I think the major impact, like your question was, I hate to say this, but it'd be harvesting, right? There's just more and more people in each region, and that's a big impact on it. And also on your chart there, many factors influence caribou populations. I don't know if you should have or shouldn't have, but I'll leave it to somebody else to decide. Like the research does a little bit of effect on it. It's good to have research, but a lot of people are concerned about too much research, too much callers, and too much collaring, because I don't know if, I imagine maybe a few of you were involved in collaring caribou, but I was when I was younger, working with a biologist, and I could actually just, you chase them with a helicopter and shoot them with a net gun. Like and it's really like, and you're doing it in dead of winter, like, they just survived a hard winter, and we usually do it in winter. We do it in the winter because it's less impact, because they got the snow to fall on and everything else, but you're actually chasing the herd of caribou with a helicopter and netting them and putting collars on them, which is detrimental, and sometimes, because you do find caribou, a leg could be broken or whatever. It does affect overall mortality, another mortality in the herd. But I don't know if that helps. Just thought I'd put that in. Thank you.
That's very interesting about the your experiences with the collaring of the caribou. Eric, I do remember reading in the report that some of the research does seem to be dependent upon the collaring. Maybe you can just speak about that a little bit, and maybe about any other stressors or impacts on caribou.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like Johnny mentioned there, harvesting, predation, the weather, all those things play a large role when we're talking about the root causes of herd populations and trends in abundance. And one of the things I think that actually plays a substantial role is vegetation and access to vegetation. And when we talk about the herds cycling and going through phases of increase and decline, I think a lot of that has to do with the role of vegetation recovery. As populations grow, obviously they impact their range and their habitat more because there's more caribou on the range. And this can lead to overgrazing and trampling. You also have things on the range like natural disturbance, such as forest fires, that play a role in that. But once the range is depleted, it takes a long time to recover. And I think that's when you start to see the declines in many herds. But then as the herds start to decline, I think like you've seen probably in the Bathurst and George River, as Johnny was mentioning, I think that's when caribou become more vulnerable to a lot of those disturbances and threats. That's when harvesting can have larger impacts. That's when harsh winters or icing events can have larger impacts. So I think all these things are related, but I would say that the vegetation, the access to vegetation is kind of the driver of the population dynamics. And then once that vegetation starts to recover, hopefully we see caribou populations start to recover in line with that. But you also do have to be considerate of all the other stressors, anthropogenic stressors, hunting, climate change, development, predation, that can have an effect and impacts when they're at low numbers.
Muted. I was wondering if any other participants have a comment on what Johnny was speaking about the impact of hunting and of collaring or any other stressors that you or impacts on the caribou population. Just unmute yourself and you can start talking. Yes, Laurent.
Well, I've been in my hometown all my life in Nauyat and over here. When I was a kid, we hardly had any caribou near Repulse Bay. We used to go quite a ways in the summertime to go hunting caribou for clothing and mostly for clothing. Now since the 70s, we started to have some herd coming into near Nauyat anyway, and there were quite a bit of caribou that time when they came in the fall. Since that time, we had caribou all that time since somewhere in the 1970s. So there's been quite a bit every year. And let's say about 5 years ago, hunters started to go hunting caribou more for food, of course, and for selling to the other communities. And they take quite a bit every year in the wintertime mostly. It didn't seem to have any big change on the herd, except for this year. Like I said, there was hardly any caribou on our east side, but this year we went hunting mostly to the west side of Repulse Bay, and we catch quite a bit still, and people still catch them for food and for selling mostly to Baffin, I think. I don't know exactly, but mostly for sending out to Baffin and northern communities. Some to Kivalit. I don't know if that has any effect on the herd. I think we have our herd from Wedge Bay area. We still have some caribou. There's some out there. A day trip, or we get caribou. So I don't know if it has any effect. The selling and for food. I don't know. We'll probably know later on in a couple of years, see what happens. I don't know if we're gonna lose our herd or not. That's just one of my thoughts anyway. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I see in the questions and answers, we have Al and Adam who said, I have not lived that long, but our trends are 60 to 75 years. This is from oral history I have heard over the years. Lichen take 40 years or more to grow. Once depleted, it takes a long time. Forest fires play a big part too. Any comments on the forest fires, especially from Ningola and Timothy and Eva, if you have your audio.
Hi, it's Zakiro. My observation is, like when I was growing up, some of us, like myself, we used to live in an outpost, and now we're settled in this community of Kimirot. Around 1979, we moved into the settlement. My late father was named Khilirti, and he wanted to stay in his wintering grounds, and the name is Khiyuktuak. It's approximately 30 miles from Kimirot. And we used to have an outpost camp there. And I could tell you, it was a land where there was absolutely no caribou. And we know my father used to go hunting only in the summertime to go catch caribou by boat. And so he had to travel to reach the caribou grounds. And it was in the area of Baffin Bay, towards more Baffin Bay area. And so he used to go hunt there. Now, after my father passed away around 1981, and thereafter, around 1980, maybe 1986, around 1990, in that time frame, the land he had, that he grew up in, and I was there when I was a child, Khiyuktuak, the land, I could tell you that there are caribou now, and there are caribou in recent times, as even as in this year. And so I feel that there are more caribou in and around that, but when I was growing up, we did not see that. And so I was very happy when someone caught caribou in that area, because it seemed to have a different flavor. And I was always pleased to get a bite out of that caribou meat from that region. And I could tell you, I was very happy that we were able to catch at that time before the closure of any caribou hunting. But now we have a quota system, and I could tell you it was the sweetest taste ever, but it's been a very long time since I had any meat. But as far as the collaring goes, I wanted to comment. I know maybe there aren't as many as there used to be. I know that a few of them lost their fur and had issues around their neck, and then they had issues, the caribou. And so this is a program run by the government. My father, I was telling you about him. I could tell you the land he grew up in didn't have caribou, but now it has caribou. Thank you. And I wanted to buy caribou. That was her last comment.
Thank you. So it's interesting, actually, that you were just speaking about the taste of caribou and eating the caribou meat, because the next question I wanted to ask is about how are caribou important to the health and the economy of Northerners. And Timothy, I'd like to invite you to respond first if your audio is working now. Otherwise, we'll make sure it's working tomorrow. So yeah, about caribou and caribou's importance to the health and economy of Northerners.
Oh, apa kerja bunga? Gimana kamu
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here from Kimirut. It's me. I'm going to respond to that question. For us, some of us haven't had caribou meat in a long time. And it's open, the quota system is open in August, and many of our residents follow the rules. So they cannot hunt, and so they only hunt in the summer. So August is when, the month of August is when it opens, where a hunter could harvest. In our community, we have a harvest of 25 tags, and we can only hunt in the summertime during August. For me, it's paramount, it's important that to have a taste of our meat as it's part of our culture. And we try to share equally or to as many people as possible when someone does catch one, because we want to ensure, even if it's a small piece, so that even if they're not our close relatives, so that they can have that reminiscent taste of what it was like when they were young children or young teenagers, to get back to that time in their lives where they grew up in a style of living that was much different it is today. So that is important for us to share that caribou meat so that they can relive that moment. And also it's important because Inuit, as for our traditional foods, we tend to start to eat more store-bought foods. And so how can I phrase this? We tend to say that to our children, we want to ensure you're going to eat our country foods. We wanted to say that and repeat that to our children, whether they should have frozen meat, boiled meat, and so on. That's always been an important aspect of our daily living. And we all know as Inuit people that it's vital to be part for our country food, from the land, from the ocean. The Inuit food is allowing a person body to be able to be self-sufficient and strong, because it's vital to our nutrition. It's to include that. So I wanted to comment on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Johnny, what, if you're still there, what are your thoughts on the importance of caribou to the health and economy of the communities in the North?
Caribou is very important to definitely the health of Inuit, Inuvialuit, and it's a major food staple. And like as a hunter and trapper, and like every year we have to get our supply, and like we go out of our way to try and get a few caribou at least to feed our family and our extended family, sharing with others exactly what Ningola said, that we shared. But because there's, you know, there's like lady said, that there's a lot of Southern influence, and a lot of people you know, sure they're working and everything, which is good, but they don't harvest as much, and like if they don't have extended family, it's hard for them to get meat, caribou meat. So like, I don't know, I'm getting into trouble on this, but the hunters and trappers organizations, they organize community hunts, which I personally totally disagree with. And it just takes away the culture. Now they're even hiring, it's more or less like, to me, on a community hunt, they pay the hunters to hunt. And yeah, it's good. They divide up the meat and give it to people in the community. But it takes away the traditional aspect of it, because we're paying these people to hunt. So actually we're selling caribou. And caribou, like in the past, it was always given away. And I know it's a catch-22 situation, and the hunters need gas. It's just more or less replacement of gas and time and whatever else. But we only have so many tags. We're quoted in one of the herds, like the blue nose herd. We only have 75 tags for the community. And right off the bat, 25 of them are used for a community hunt. So we lose 1/3 of our tags. As like a hunter, and there's 800 people, beneficiaries total. So there's at least a few dozen hunters that are after a few tags, and we only have 50 to divide up amongst everybody else. Mm. But no, it is important to us, and it's a major food staple. You look at the price of beef, and up here is, $12 a pound or whatever. And whereas it costs, we got to go 100 miles for a caribou, but if you get 3 caribou, it's equivalent. You can't put a price on it because of the, compared to beef, it's just that alone is like a couple $1,000s worth of meat and that'll carry us over the winter.
Right.
But yeah, I just want to make it clear that it's very important to our culture and our food staple. Even though I have a regular job and everything else, it's like we still need our country foods, like the lady said. Thank you.
Thank you. Laurent, what are your thoughts on Johnny's words and about community hunts?
Well, I think he's right. Yes, but for us in Naujaat here, we have enough caribou to go around. The problem with the
Oh, Laurent, you just muted yourself. There you go.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Well, he's right. But in our town, there's caribou to what the question is we have enough caribou to go around. So the HTO sent out hunters to go catch caribou, and they get paid to distribute some meat to the community, because some people are on welfare. They don't have any machines to go hunting, no boats, and they help those people. And I think it's very healthy that way, because store-bought food is expensive now. And all those things that have been added to those store-bought food is, I don't think it's very good if you eat it most of your life. For me, that is. And people on Facebook even ask for food, caribou meat, because they don't have any families to go hunting for them. So I think if you have enough caribou, it's good that program. So, and it's healthy for you because you don't buy as much food, store-bought food that has a lot of stuff on it. Well, that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Eric, any thoughts to add to what you've just heard about the importance? Yep, go ahead.
Aye.
Somebody asked a question as to when is the best time of the year when they taste better. I could tell you that there are differences in the bull caribou, the female caribou, and the young caribou. And so we don't prefer the older ones. I remember a bull caribou before when it was caught. And so the bull caribou, I could tell you they used to be caught mainly the purpose of it so that the Inuit would have mattress cover and also for clothing. And so that was the main purpose of why we caught bull caribou. The other ones that are the younger caribou, she's forgetting the names of the which ones, but I could tell you that they're good and excellent use for making sewn products for clothing. Also the meat. In the winter time, that's when it's the best time of the season to have good tasting caribou meat. So somebody had asked that question about when is the best time of the year. So I wanted to comment on that and I forgot the other question. Thank you, I'll end there.
Thank you. I just wanted to read a comment from one of the attendees. Peter says, Johnny, I agree with you. When people on welfare can't afford to go hunting because they can't afford to buy hunting equipment, they also lose out on living the traditional way of life. So just some feedback on your comments, Johnny. I also wanted to mention to people who were asking about the link to the report. The report, the Caribou report and the other reports in this series will be published later this spring in the Akalia Journal. And you can go to the Polar website and just keep checking in there to see when they're going to be published. And I'm sure that there will also be an announcement on social media if you follow the Facebook page. Eric, I wanted just to move on to our last question for today, which is, I'm sure that there are some issues that are of interest with regards to caribou that are of interest to both scientists and also Indigenous communities. So for you as a research and being involved in the report, what are some of these issues that could be of joint interest that could be new research projects?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think obviously a lot of the research projects and interests, they're always complex and intertwined. And everything seems to be changing faster now than it ever has before. And I think one of the big ones to watch would be how climate change impacts things and how caribou respond to climate change, whether that's a change in rain or snow in the winter and how that kind of affects vegetation. Maybe new species of vegetation that are encroaching farther north. And like I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of the changes in abundance are vegetation driven. So For me personally, I think monitoring changes in vegetation due to climate change would be probably a really good place to start, and is definitely, I think, of joint interest between researchers and community members.
So Eric was saying that an issue that could be of a great research project that would be interesting to both communities in the North and to Indigenous peoples and to researchers, the scientists, is about changes in vegetation and how that's tied in with climate change's impact on vegetation, and how that's impacting the caribou. What are your thoughts on that? Would that be of interest to Indigenous communities, or what do you think the priorities are for research? You're welcome just to unmute yourself and to speak. I'm thinking particularly, Eric, with your words about the vegetation. There's a very striking picture that's going to be included in the report when it's published, and it's about the lichen. And maybe if somebody wants to comment about the lichen and growth and whether that's changing and what the impact might be on the caribou. Okay, from anybody in the group, what do you think the research priorities should be?
I got a question.
Oh, yes, please.
Just join me up from Caribou. I just miss it. Some of it.
I thought for a minute there, Timothy and Eva had their audio issues sorted out. Call-in user number 2, Johnny, I think you started to comment.
Sorry, my line was cut off and I just missed some of it. And I would like to hear some of it, and the one I missed, my line was cut off and I just missed some of it. And we're going to have a meeting tonight, and I would like to go to the meeting, the one I missed. Can you continue for some of it? And the one I missed, I would like to go to the committees.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Johnny, do you have any thoughts on the research priorities?
Yep.
Don't go ahead.
Go ahead, Clyde River.
Yep. We're gonna have a meeting tonight, and the one of the committees might be listening for that, and you got something to say. Something to the committees tonight.
Okay. Perhaps if the committee talks about caribou research, the thoughts can be sent to Madeline to be, so to make sure that we get that. That would be great. Thank you. Okay.
Laura, that's Johnny.
Yes, thank you, Johnny.
I just want to mention, like, we were talking about research and how it affects caribou. Like, when caribou migrate to around here, they migrate into the tree line, usually for the winter, and especially the blue nose herd and the porcupine herd also. But I noticed I was traveling east of Inuvik into the tree line a couple times this fall, December, and there's a lot of caribou in the tree line, but towards the end of December, I made a trip up there and I noticed they're really moving. I thought they were moving in, as you could see the trails, but actually I went up again later and they were all gone. But seemed like in December, I just done some numbers. We had a couple big snowfalls. That's like definitely abnormal. Like for example, we had 6 inches of snow in December, which doesn't sound like much, but when you're right on the edge of the tree line and you get a north wind, especially in December, when there's no rough ice to catch the snow and the tundra, it just all blows over. And the main settling place for the snow is in the tree line, and it just gets deep snow right away. But the caribou moved out, like they realized it was deeper than normal, and they all moved out of the tree line. They went back to the edge to where the tundra was. But normally they stay in the trees right until like this time of year, then they start moving out. They left a couple months early. But I guess that's a survival technique that, they survived, the last couple 10,000 years. They're Stone Age animals, they say. But they could definitely do some research on the conditions of the areas. Like, yeah, is it related to climate change? Because compared to other years, like in December, we usually have like at the most 2 or 3, maybe 2 or 3 inches of snow in December. Like I said, this year we had over 6 inches, twice as much compared to other years. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions from the Q&A from the attendees that we'll just invite anybody to respond to. And the first one is, if you have any comments on shipping or boating that might impact ice conditions and caribou movement and health. Go ahead, Laurent.
Yes, yes, ice conditions. Yes, I forgot to mention before for caribou migrating near our town. Well, in the late spring, I noticed we noticed caribou migrating or walking towards the north or east every year, and they usually went through the sea ice. Some of them went through the sea ice going north or east, northeast, Repulse Bay. Now we don't see them much anymore because our bay is not freezing earlier. There's a huge, the bay is, even now is open water. It's about halfway where it usually did freeze over. And I don't think caribou used to walk east about 20 miles down. Now, 20 miles down, it's mostly open water now. So there's no caribou walking up anymore. So I guess they're going to more like north of Nauyat. That's one of the things I wanted to say, and I forgot about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm also wondering if anybody could speak to the George River herd. It's a question from the audience.
I can mention just a couple brief things about the George River herd, Laura, because that was one of the herds that was a focal herd for a report. And a couple of things that we discussed with the George River was obviously they're at low numbers right now. I think the recent estimate was around 8,000 and the historic highs are around 800,000. And so, but keeping that in mind, I think the 2018 estimate was around 5,500 or so. So there has been a slight rebound lately. And one of the things that is interesting that we touched on in the report that was in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, some of the callers, the tracking callers, they picked up that there's evidence of migration between the George River and the Leaf River herd that are next to each other, and that some caribou were moving from the George River to the Leaf River and vice versa. And that trend seemed to stop, I think, and they haven't seen any evidence of that from the callers recently within the last decade or so. And when you were talking about emerging issues or research interests, for me personally, I think one interesting thing to look at would be seeing if there is immigration from adjacent herds as herds start to recover. So if the George River does continue to recover, or looks like they're going to continue to recover, is there any immigration from the Leaf River herd joining the George River range during that period? Or if they stay pretty separate and they stay kind of in their own range and stay on their own calving grounds. And so that could be something interesting to look at, not just for the George River, but for barren ground herds in general across the north.
Okay, thank you. And then we have one final question here today. And this is from Mathilde. I am wondering what the panelists think about the impact of geese on vegetation and then in turn on the caribou. Is this something of concern for community members? And Mathilde adds, thanks for all for sharing your knowledge and thoughts. So this is about the impact of geese on vegetation and then therefore the impact on the caribou. I invite anybody to answer.
She just wants you to repeat that last question. If you can just rephrase it more simply.
I know.
You were saying just simplify the question, and so she wants to answer your question.
Thank you. What is the impact of geese on vegetation? The vegetation that the caribou might eat.
For me, I separate the two species where I think that their caribou has their own food source and that the geese have their own food source. So we know that the geese are more in marshy areas where their food source are. So I don't see them overlapping, and I don't see that as an issue. But I do know that when somebody comments that you're trying to get knowledge from Inuit Kauyamayatukangi traditional knowledge. However, there seems to be sometimes a conflict where the two knowledge clashes, where Inuit knowledge is not respected, and it becomes like an underneath the scientific research. So that's my own thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to add to that, Laura, if I may, that in our region, I don't think there's no issue with geese and caribou. That time of year, springtime, all the vegetation is in bloom. There's lots for both to eat, and usually the main flocks, big flocks of geese are separate. They're definitely in the north, but they're in a separate area than the caribou calving areas.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I was going to invite Elder Timothy to give closing remarks, but unfortunately the audio issues that we're having, we really can't hear Eva and Timothy. So I wonder if one of the ladies with Ningola might like to give some closing remarks for our discussion today, and then we will close the webinar.
Okay, I'm asking anybody there?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, it's me, Akiro Khilirti. I'll speak in Inuktitut.
Thank you.
Let us pray. As an individual human being, we are not able to do it on our own. And we rely on our Lord. The last hour that we were able to complete the task that was provided to us with the questions that were asked. I am humbled before you, Lord, that I was able to participate freely. I want to pray for those in other regions of the world. And I pray that those that are participating, that we can come to a common agreement and be open in our communication and our thoughts so that we may be able to move forward in life without due harm to each other. We also ask you, Lord, that you have provided us on this earth the abundance of food, that we may be able to continue to respect the food that you have provided us and be able to ensure that we can continue to have it on this beautiful earth, and so that you will continue to provide us in our lives the abundance that you have provided to us all these years. And I am thankful, Lord, that you have provided that to us. I pray to you that you may bless our homes so that you can give us peace and give peace to those living around us, whether they be in our workplace or whether they be in our own individual homes, that you look after us overnight to ensure that we are safe. And those that have helped in this process of facilitating this wonderful meeting this past hour, as well as all the interpreters and those that use the different languages to be able to communicate as you have provided that to us, that we may be able to work for a common purpose. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. And with those words, I'd like to end today's meeting. I hope that you can join us again tomorrow for the webinar on environmental change. If you haven't registered for that yet, please visit the Eventbrite website where you registered for this webinar, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.